What is something that you have changed your mind on in the last 5 years with AI, education, something else?
Um, I respect deep learning more than I have in the past. AI is a big basket, and it includes everything from Bayesian statistics to generative AI, and part of that is deep learning. And I respect the deep learning more because at least you can control the corpus that you're using to train. You're not exactly training it in the same way you're doing a transformer, but you're training it.
And when you're following the AI space, are there people, institutions, podcasters? How are you getting your information? Is it more the mainstream outlets? Is it research papers, journals? Where are you going to understand these things?
Boy, all of the above, plus various Substacks or Substack-like things. They tend to be AI policy-based Substacks like Brian Merchant's or um, can't remember Edzitron. Um, But when it comes to straight up AI, um, the stuff that comes out of the Association for Computing Machinery, since some of my research is also relatively technical, because I also do research on natural language processing. So I do follow that field and try to be SOTA or state of the art as much as possible.
Couple of minutes before we hit record, we were talking about noise versus the signal. And you were saying that the signal to you is noise for somebody else and vice versa. How do you distinguish something that is the signal, or how do you distinguish something that is noise?
I see the signal as social justice, as equity for the weakest and the most vulnerable among us. AI that serves these marginalized populations, as opposed to some fiction of AI for good or um, some kind of AI for making sure a middle power like Canada can punch above its weight. So that's my position for the signal. The noise would be things like anyone who uses a for the children argument, which you see in the AI safety acts. Um, and there's a bill currently in Canada. Um, or economic development arguments, because economic development, so for the children arguments, often the subtext of that is we have to protect the children at all expenses, even if that means we have to erase anonymity for everyone in the world as a condition to participate on social media or AI related things. Uh, it's a windfall for big tech to both get a new data source because you can tie social media responses to actual individuals. It destroys the ability or easy ability to have whistleblowers. Not that anonymity is always a great thing. If you look at the polarization you see on places like Twitter, X, that there are reasons why you want anonymity. Um, it can hurt small to medium-sized enterprises who may not be able to afford to comply with privacy and identification policies. It's all around it's problematic to use these for the children arguments. It's problematic because there are plenty of children who may need to be on the internet to see information about, I think I might be trans or I might be gay. Um, it can shut them off from that too, and there's empirical evidence to show that that happens these kinds of conditions, or And I also mentioned economic development because economic development usually devolves to give me a way to fire people or give me a way to not hire people so that one person now has to do the work of three people. Uh, and um, and also questions of, okay, you have a more productive employee, but at what cost to the employee? And who sees the benefits of that productivity? It is usually or almost exclusively not the employee or the employees. So there's that. And there's also the issue of we externalize a lot of this stuff. So we externalize social media content moderation and AI training to the developing world. So we benefit from that. If we're doing in this AI arms race, we're not doing it without the assistance of millions of people in poor countries. So we need to bring those people into the discussion in terms of policy. So there's my signal. There's my noise.
I'm not going to say that these things are new to me, but it's almost that people are, it's not just hesitant, but they they find these topics somewhat uncomfortable to talk about at times, or at least to go into great depth about them. Have you experienced this as well? What's the reception when you're talking about these things at this type of length? Are people open to these ideas, or are they more maybe dismissive or hand wavy about that?
There is a lack of education or literacy, but I have a lot of things to say about literacy, particularly AI literacy on the part of the public. And that doesn't mean it's the public's fault. The public sometimes is as literate as it needs to be, and it says, I don't like AI because if I'm not losing a job, then my children can't get work. Um, so there there it's really hard for the public to be engaged when they're not being told what this stuff is about without hectoring. It's like, oh, you're stupid, you don't know what AI is. And then they turn around and they say, well, what you need to know about AI is how good it is for you, how it's going to benefit the economy, how it's going to benefit you personally. No, that's not proper education. That's not proper literacy about AI. That's proper literacy about AI includes all the potential and actual social consequences. It includes conversations about the trade-offs. You want a more convenient world, but at what cost is that convenience? It's that those are the conversations. That's the literacy that I'm looking for, not the front loading the literacy with it's going to solve all your problems and cure all cancer and solve chess and go and construct new proteins. This litany of assumed promise benefits while pushing AI on us. Like, I don't want Google Gemini to always pop up in my Google search engine anymore. Um, that's to me is not literacy. In fact, that damages literacy. So I don't think that the media, I know that our government, I know that North American governments haven't done a good job in creating more literacy because all they're just interested in is like, oh, you hate robots or you hate, you know, it's going to take away your job, as opposed to trying to get people engaged in what this means.
Let's double tap on literacy just for a second. What is literacy to you? I know you went into details and I appreciate that, but is literacy choice or is it the cognizance of the choice?
I'm trying to think about whether those are different from each other. Um, And I'm not sure I completely buy the way you framed it, because often when one says choice, one is talking about individual choice. And I'm much more interested in the choices that communities make and the choices that societies make. Canada has made major investments in AI. Should it have made major investments? I don't think that's a matter of an individual choice. It could be a matter of a societal choice. Um, so often when we talk about individual choices, we're immediately relegated to discussions about individual privacy or convenience. Um, and to me, those are not informed choices. For example, uh, Google Gemini, every time it pops up, it's chipping a little bit away at energy consumption. That may increase your energy costs. And I know there's huge debate about water consumption, but fresh water consumption is like, oh, there are all these encapsulated data centers that aren't using water. But I think that there's sufficient debate remaining about water usage. So um, is it really an individual choice about choosing to use it or not, especially when it's really difficult, increasingly difficult to avoid it, whether it's with a Google search or whether it's with Zoom or whether it's with Microsoft products where this stuff is always popping up? It's like I don't even want this to pop up because the fact that it's popping up is itself AI generated. So, so I'm just a little skeptical of the framing of this framing about choice because choice, as I mentioned, can also be about individual privacy. Privacy is almost used as a fetish in our country and elsewhere. It's like the number one harm, the number one risk is to our privacy. Well, first of all, there are other harms. Like if you're a black or brown person and you get wrongfully arrested because of facial recognition technology, uh, did you have a choice about that? What does choice even mean in those conditions? Um, the papers about GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, I can't remember the exact spelling of the acronym in Europe, found that it was the people who had the most resources to increase their privacy as opposed to a more general population. Um, Also, we talk a lot when we talk about privacy, we talk about individual privacy. We don't necessarily talk about collective privacy. We don't talk about whether or not, um, is it, let's say you're in a marginalized group. Maybe you want your whole category of people or your whole community to be protected. As many Indigenous groups in Canada do. They want a community privacy. They don't want an individual privacy. So there's all of these things that get wrapped up in talking about choice that we don't think about because especially the more market-based or capitalist that we are, we think it's only about our individual choice that matters. And I'll even add to that that you also see conversations about transparency. It's like as long as we tell you what algorithms we're using on you, that's okay. Okay. I'm in Ontario. I'm a subcontractee in a janitorial service, and you tell me that as a condition of my job, I have to download this app that's going to track me second to second. Or say you're in an Amazon warehouse. What choice do you have if it's a condition of getting employment? So, and what does transparency mean if you have no way to act on that? It's like, okay, but you can't get the job without it.
What do we do as I won't say as an individual, but maybe as a community, as a society, is there a way to push back when a technology has become, I'll say quasi embedded, but I'll just say embedded in the fabric of day to day living? Because again, we can go on Google, they have Gemini. Um, my mom, for example, is a high school teacher in Ontario, and she's forced to use Copilot to build her curriculums, for example. And she was asking me, what the best way to do this is, and I was shocked at the fact that she is even forced to use this. This is a mandatory thing that the teachers are going through now. And, and if she were to say no, then she would get into all sorts of different kinds of trouble. What do we do in this case? Is it protesting in the streets? Is it using social media, for example, and going that pathway? Is it emailing folks and trying to create signatures? Like what is that first step or major step?
Can I question an assumption?
Please, please.
Okay. You're assuming that it's inevitable, and
Oh,
it
okay.
is
Interesting.
not. And individually, it's tough. But if you're in a union, it's not so tough. So your mother is in a union as a high school teacher in Ontario. Her union has power to argue that this is a negative effect on her workplace. So she can get other people in the union, and the union can fight this mandatory inclusion of Microsoft Copilot. You can be engaged in your local government. When we think about AI, another assumption, we think it's purely the domain of the private sector, and often it's only the domain of big tech. But local companies use AI. Local governments use AI. Provincial governments, state governments use AI. National governments use AI. We can be active in those realms. So we can say, we don't like you. We don't like the local police department using facial recognition technology or predictive policing. So we don't want that. So we're going to launch a campaign to remove that. Local government may be using it elsewhere to do like traffic monitoring. Maybe we don't want that as well, because maybe they're over surveilling homeless populations or poor neighborhoods. Maybe we don't want that. Or we don't want as many CCTV cameras. So we could do that. We could do it provincially. We could do it nationally. So there are ways that we can act. And I have done that. So um, it's not like I'm just being academic here. Uh, I've done that as well, locally and also nationally. Now, I'm not saying that this is cost free. Sometimes there is a cost, because if your mother decides to reject Copilot and bring it to the union, there may be others in her union who actually like it. There may be others in her union who say something like, I wish I didn't have to use it, but because there's so many pressures on my time, that I feel forced to use it. So there may be a cost to these kinds of personal relationships. There is definitely, I call myself an AI skeptic. There are very, very few AI skeptics in Canada. There is a cost to being an AI skeptic as opposed to an AI evangelist, or someone who is just, oh, I support AI overall, but I think we should be a little bit cautious in some of the things that we do. Right. So there are costs to taking various intensities of stances.
I'll go away from AI, but we'll still circle it. But I'm really, really, I so much appreciate the call outs because again, I enjoy knowing where my, let's just say the blind spots are. And when you're talking about the communities and the societies and having those conversations, it speaks out to me so much because I feel like those are conversations that are not just, it's not just that they're not happening at the scale that we want them to, but I think that we've lost the ability or maybe the art, or maybe we've, maybe not lost, but we've not practiced that muscle. We've not exercised that muscle as much as we can or should. What would that look like if we were to have a conversation as a community or a society? Is it going back into the town hall? Is it, what does that, how do we regain that ability to have these discussions, not just about AI, but about everything?
That's really hard. I'm not saying that it isn't hard, especially since Canada does not have a long history as opposed to the United States of this really deep citizen engagement or community engagement or pushback or resistance. Pushback doesn't always have to be resistance, but sometimes it is. I mean, you look at there's a city in Ontario that has said no to data centers that fuel AI, that fuel generative AI. So that's what some kind of pushback looks like. Protests is another, but the kind of deep engagement in governance, uh, we almost have to rebuild it. I think that's one of the things that you're struggling with is the sheer challenge of rebuilding this the responsibility side of the rights and responsibilities. So it's challenging. I think it can be done. Sometimes we diminish what parents do with their children in terms of like meeting their teachers or engaging in school activities. That is a kind of citizen participation. You can expand on that to take a parents group to city hall or city council. So there are ways to do that in Canada, in the US, that starts to exercise the muscle a little bit.
Not the only reason, but one of the main reasons I'm incredibly passionate about this is because, I'm Gen Z, I'm 25, and a lot of my generation and even the younger generations, my girlfriend, she has a bunch of little sisters and they're starting to be forced to use, chat GPT and the chatbots and such. My girlfriend is in university right now and she's forced to use, chat GPT and such. It's such a strange thing to see just from, I guess, the interpersonal level and the student level. What are you seeing from the level of an educator and a professor? What are the detriments that you are seeing day to day from people using this? Because I think, again, we're talking about so many different things and they all intersect, but I feel that right now parents have unfortunately no clue what is going on in the classroom at this moment in time with regards to technology and how this technology is affecting their kids. That's my belief. Number one, do you agree with that? And number two, what are you seeing?
I agree with you about parents being clueless, and I don't think it's necessarily the fault of the parents because things are moving quite rapidly, particularly in the realm of generative AI and particularly in the realm of hammer in search of a nail. There is, this doesn't get at your point yet, but a lot of this intrusion of generative AI into the products that we use is a result of a lack of return on investment, ROI. Uh, that we just have to force as much generative AI on the general public, including children, including students, and see it's like throwing spaghetti against a wall. It's like, see what sticks. And then you create an IPO off of that, and you're good. So, that we're in this space in which AI is generative AI. When I say generative AI, I'm talking about chatbots. I'm talking about diffusion, foundation models that are that do text to text generation, that do text to image and image to text generation, text to audio, etc. Interesting. Right? So you can get just enough snippets of your teacher's voice, and your child can use AI to imitate your teacher to tell your parents certain things. So parents being clueless, they have no idea how easy this stuff is to use now. Talk about the acceleration of incel culture, where you have increasing number of AI girlfriends that young boys have. There's just, parents are clueless as to how easy this stuff is to use, and then just see the pernicious effects way, way down the road. But what am I seeing as okay, so I get them as undergraduates and graduate students. I don't have to go through what your mother has to go through, where they have even less maturity or self-reflection to acknowledge the impacts it will have on their lives. And I have to be sympathetic to my students who they're really worried about their jobs, prospects. They're worried about climate change, the world that they're going to emerge into. Uh, it's hard to not be sympathetic to them if they're presented with a set of tools that can help them think and substitute their thinking process. Why am I sympathetic? Because they're under such pressures, and they can reflect. So do self-reflection, but they're not completely mature even at that stage to understand the trade-offs, to understand the purely addictive quality of this when you're presented with output that ostensibly looks much better than the rough output you would have generated. So it's like it's reinforcing this inferiority complex. I could never be as good as this output. I could never do enough research to build out this essay. Plus, there are all these other pressures on my life to be able to do that. So I will just rely on that. And it's a vicious circle, because you have to be able to exercise your critical thinking skills. You have to be able to endure the frustration and the discomfort of producing results on your own that are not perfect. Doing research, being in university, learning at all is an exercise in frustration. It's an exercise in struggle. And you have to be able to live with that, because it's not comfortable. There's a reason why people are using generative AI to write breakup messages, because that's uncomfortable to do. So why not rely on something that takes away every bit of discomfort? But then, because you're not used to any frustration, or less and less, then you're going to increasingly rely on this technology, not realizing what it's doing to your brain when you don't have access to it anymore. Now, people are making the counter argument that, oh, Renee, you're such a Luddite, because don't you realize this is inevitable, and you actually have to train them how to be good prompt engineers. because this is what their world is going to be like when they get out. But I'm looking at a potential generation of people who cannot think without devices. And it's not merely a matter of I'm going to write all this stuff and it's going to be really rough, or I'm going to do all my research and it's going to be really rough. And then I will get the generative AI at the final step and refine it, touch it up. No, they're saying, I'm half in the School of Environment. A lot of my students want to look at the societal impacts of fast fashion or the environmental impacts of fast fashion. Uh, and, they can go to generative AI and say, I'm interested, here's the course, because there's sufficient information about the course itself online that can be scraped. And my topic is fast fashion. Write the entire essay for me. Write all the intermediate assignments for me. That's where we are right now. So, what kind of students are we producing when we accept as inevitable that they're going to have to be good prompt engineers?
I don't laugh because it's funny. It's just, um, you know, when I go over to my girlfriend's house and we're having dinner with her parents and her sisters, almost every single time, my girlfriend's little sister, she's 6, one of her little sisters, but the littlest one, the youngest one, she is 6, and she is always on a device, always, almost glued. And I've gotten really good at just, gently but directly taking the device and turning it off and saying, let's have dinner together. Let's look each other in the eyes, which she struggles with, but she's learning. And that makes me apoplectic, just seeing that. And she's 6. And, she's on TikTok and Instagram, and she shouldn't be there consuming anything like that. So now we're talking about these two buckets of people where we have the skeptics, and there's like 5 in Canada, let's say. There's not that many. And we have the AI, the AI bros. It's here to stay, Renee. Just live with it. You got to learn how to do it. You got to learn how to teach it to your kids, because the kids, they're going to be held back if they don't learn how to do this. And obviously parents want the best for their kids, which is why the parents get the kids the iPhone with the Instagram and the Chat GPT, because they've heard from Elon Musk and whoever that, we're going to Mars and we need to make sure that everybody has AI in their pocket because it's better for them. And if you don't have a phone, how are your kids going to call you if they're in trouble? So you need to have a phone. You need to make sure you're tracking them on the phone, and you need to download Instagram as well. All of these different things, right? We're at a point in the world, in history, where we are actively creating technologies that are not serving anything other than a small few. But we're not asking the questions of, number one, is it possible to create technologies that serve everybody? And number two, do we need to? Do we need to create technologies for this? Or are we just, again, not exercising a muscle that we already have? Because I could argue, again, you and I are basically neighbors, right? You live just, a handful of blocks the other direction. This is much easier, and it's much easier just because we're able to be in the comfort of our home, and I can be with my cat and all of these things, but we could have met in person. If you know what I'm getting at, are we just neglecting a lot of the things just because they are easy? And if we are neglecting them because they're easy, how do we have those conversations with parents, with students, with folks like yourself, with policymakers, with politicians, with everybody? That's not going to get us dismissed as Luddites, because I don't think that we are Luddites at all.
Oh no, I embrace Luddism.
Okay,
Why?
please say more.
Because Luddites were against if you read Brian Merchant's book or Kirkpatrick Sale's book on the history of Luddism, Luddites were against dehumanizing technology, but they didn't get to write the history. They were suppressed. They were beaten back. So the people who got to write the history wrote them as ignorant of tech, wrote them as a backward.
Is it possible to create or humanizing technology?
Sure.
What if we can just riff? What would that look like?
I think would be kind of nice if blind people could navigate space as easily as a sighted person. Uh, so I think that technology could be used to help blind people. I think that if we want human technology, we in the first world have to embrace what it takes to annotate for training data. So we have to be exposed to some of the horrendous content that is out there, so at least we know, and then seek mental health support for people in the global south who are doing this, because they're often just fired if they complain or have breakdown. So if we can see the massive effects and experience some of the massive effects, I think that's a part of humanizing technology. Uh, so I think that there are I mean, people talk about the use of AI for autistic people. I don't think that you need to have the high performance generative AI that's being produced right now. In fact, you don't, right? You can have a local generative AI that allows autistic people to, if they have social issues, to better interact. So that's like some examples of what a human technology would look like.
Yeah, we don't need to generate essays. We can generate them ourselves. It's called thinking and writing
Yes,
and struggling. Yeah,
yes.
I'm always surprised that humans, where we're like creating vacuums to vacuum everything up, that are like robot vacuums, when it's just like, why don't you just use the vacuum? It's like, anyway.
I mean, think about your the 6-year-old. The 6-year-old is, you mentioned you were I can't even say the word now, apoplectic. But I'm assuming that the 6-year-old was similarly really agitated when you took the device away.
At the start she was, but then we started explaining to her like, hey, this is bad for you, and it's really good for you to spend time with us. You've already spent 7 hours today on your device. you know Spend an hour with us and have dinner and chat and be the annoying 6-year-old that you're supposed to be because you don't know any social norms, and like be the cute person that you're supposed to be because you're 6. Like, let us enjoy the moment with you as much as you enjoying the moment with us.
Yeah, so think about what are the types of play the child may be involved in that they get frustrated at? Let's say they're playing with clay and they can't get the object to conform to their vision. So they say, forget that. I'm going to go back to my device because my device always tells me how great I am, and I can build clay models um, online instead of in person. So think about the ways that we're robbing children because they're not struggling with, because even in play is creativity, and creativity has some amount of struggle in it until you perfect it or get it to do what you want it to do. So they would probably rather go to the device than to be engaged in this kind of physical touch grass activity.
I like to end these podcasts on better notes. So, if you had a magic wand and you could solve one problem in the world, what would it be and why?
Well, I mean, since we're talking about this, I'd get rid of generative AI.
Completely?
Yes.
Yeah. If it had nothing to do with AI, let's say you got another wish after you remove generative AI, what are you doing?
I don't know. This is like Aladdin's lamp, where it's like you have to game out all the repercussions and you have to be really precise in your answer.
No, no, no. Let's just pretend it's a perfect magic wand, and the genie is not this Instagram meme where it's going to mess up. It's just what I always struggle with this question. I'll be honest with you because I don't think that we should give people the expectation of waving like everything has a magic pill. Like every problem has a magic pill that can solve it. But I always like asking the question just to show people that people are thinking about certain problems and thinking seriously and in depth about certain problems.
I would like to be a lot fairer to people in our own country, unhoused people, refugees, indigenous people. I'm not going to ask for world peace, but I mean, could we just start with like fixing water situations amongst indigenous people in the north? How about that?
Last question is what gives you hope in the world?
Well, I said I teach in a school of environment. Um, Gen Zs are not passive. They're engaged, they're passionate. They don't necessarily think the way I do, but they're passionate, and that gives me a lot of hope. It gives me a resistance to forms of AI, and there are a lot of different ways to resist AI, from protesting data centers to, getting your union involved to even things like being sarcastic. So there's this group at the University of Toronto called Save the AI. They're really sarcastic. It's like, don't barbecue this summer. AI needs your coal. So yeah, that gives hope and makes me happy.
When dystopia arrives, it's always the comedians that come out in full force. It's great. One thing I've been loving and enjoying is the incredible art that's been able to be had. You know, the poetry and the writing, and there's a great poem. I'll link it in the show notes, but there's a great poem that says use AI, and one of the things that they say is, use AI to generate the recipe, and don't call your friend that's been a baker since she was 10 years old and has been enjoying it, because why would you need to have that conversation and catch up with her and maybe even get a coffee with her tomorrow? Just use AI to generate the recipe, and it just goes through these different examples and shows how much we're missing, and not just how much we're missing, but how much we forget that we're missing as well.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in their deathbed is going to say, if only I'd been a better prompt engineer.
Yeah, exactly. If only I'd used ChatGPT for that 1 more hour. Just horrible. Renee, thank you so much for today. Genuinely one of my favorite podcast episodes, and I so much appreciate you, you know, calling me out on those things, but also being so kind and generous with the answers. Where can we find you online to keep up with your work?
So I mean, just look for me. I'm active on LinkedIn. I used to be incredibly active on Twitter and I really miss it. Um, so LinkedIn, and just use a search engine to look for me. I publish a fair bit. Like I said, I do straight up AI, natural language processing, as well as AI policy. So you want to learn more about how I'm using NLP to investigate social perceptions of weather in the late 1800s in southern Quebec. You can look at that too, as well as the papers I've written about AI governance in Canada.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for today.
Thanks. Bye.